All right, welcome to the stage, the moderator of the next session, Professor Raj Murthy. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to some of you, depending on which part of the world you're in. Welcome, everyone. My name is Rajeshwar Murthy, and thank you for joining us for today's session and entitled Future-Proofing Factories, Strategies for Adapting to Rapid Technological Change, and an event sponsored by ARC Systems. So thank you so much for that. First off, it'd be very good if you guys could use the chat function on the site to tell us where are you, who are you, which part of the world you are joining in from. It's always nice to have that interaction, and feel free to drop your LinkedIn as well, because I already see some folks already doing that. While you are doing that and getting settled in, grabbing a cup of coffee or whichever helps you for your caffeine intake, a bit of housekeeping from my side. Number one, our session is going to be lasting just a shy of an hour. First, I'll be introducing, of course, our topic and our esteemed guest who is sharing the platform with us today. We will be getting a lot of insight, but I do want to make sure that, not myself, I think everyone here in the panel want to make sure we do have questions, time for questions from our most important people in the room. That is the audience. So I want to make sure we have enough time for that. But to make sure we handle your questions in a much more efficient manner, feel free to drop your question in the Q&A polls, not in the chat poll, so that'll be very easy for us to navigate to make sure that our panel is answering your questions in a very efficient manner. So right now, let's focus on the session. The panel today will be discussing explore the transformative impact of AI in the manufacturing sector. And we're going to look at how AI is being used today, the role of industrial agents in delivering business value, and of course, the best practices for successful AI implementation. Now, without any further ado, I would like to introduce all our very special guests who is sharing the platform with me today. We took the liberty to share some quick bio and fun fact as we're introducing our guest. First off, I'm going to have Randy Carr. Randy Carr is the CEO of World Emblem. Randy serves as the CEO of the World Emblem, driving innovation and transforming the industry in his forward-thinking leadership. He has been the member of the Young Presidents Organization called YPO since 2008 and served on its executive committee from 2019 to 2021, contributing to entrepreneurial growth and mentorship. Randy treasures his 23 years plus marriage to Amy Carr, raising two sons, JC and Jaden, who reflect the family values of perseverance and ambition. An avid skier, a natural enthusiast, he enjoyed life's adventure alongside his 4 loyal dogs, embodying a zest for life, personally and professionally. Hello, Randy. How are you today?
How are you? Thank you for having me today.
Thank you so much, Randy, for joining us. Next up, we have Jason Skern, who is the field CTO of Cognite. Jason has spent the last 25 years working with some of the largest discrete manufacturing companies to dramatically improve their data operation and machine learning analytical capability. Jason's experience led him to Cognite. He's passionate about the value and impact of trusted, accessible, contextual industrial data at scale. How are you doing, Jason?
Doing great. Glad to be with you.
Last but not the very least, to make sure our panel is complete, we have Tim Burke, who is the CTO and the co-founder of Arch System. Tim is an innovation technologist with over 10 years of experience in embedded electronics and a PhD from Stanford, where he developed the first complete theory of organic cell operation. As a Peace Corps volunteer in Panama, he independently designed a Pico hydropower plant that became a model for rural electrification. As a co-founder and a CTO of Arch System, Tim currently leads a team of next generation product to optimize manufacturing processes with intelligent action. We also want to call out Tim for being recognized with multiple industry accolades, including Forbes Under 30 and the 2022 Global Technology Award. Tim is passionate about equitable access and resource to include potential of IoT. Thank you so much for joining us today, Tim.
Yeah, thank you. Excited to be here and talk to everyone.
If I take a moment just to quickly introduce myself, my name is Raj. I'm from Malaysia. I'm currently based in Dubai. I have a decade of experience in fintech. I teach fintech. I also look at strategic foresight, emerging technology, and of course, space economy. I teach at Hull International Business School and also ESCP Business School. I'm a two-time TEDx speaker and executive fellow of digital economies, a think tank based in Washington. I also serve as the managing director and the chair of space sector for the Chart think tank, driving discussion on intersection of space economy and strategy. Now, with all the intros out of the way, I do want to quickly remind all our folks who are joining in, remember to use the Q&A function to ask all your questions. We want to get as many as we want so we can prioritize them towards the end of it later. With that, let's start with our first question. Randy, I'm going to come to you to set us off. But the question I have, Randy, for you is, you have stated that AI is a game changer for manufacturing apparel industry and will make the industry virtually unrecognizable in 3 to 5 years. How would you explain that?
So, I mean, I think the first thing is to, from my perspective anyways, is to make sure you're taking advantage of it. So like in my business, for example, we manufacture badging labels, patches, and emblems. So we approached it for two or three different levels. I think the first level we approached it was just to get sort of AI readiness to make sure that our entire staff is completely prepared to understand what the implications of the tools are, because there are very simple tools like ChatGPT and Copilot and such. But then there's other things such as design. In our case, we replicate 2,000 customer designs a day. So we'll get hand drawing piece of artwork. And we're using generative AI to take that hand drawn piece of artwork and turn it into a customer ready design file instantly online for the customer to have a rendered piece of production ready file on the spot. So right there, you're taking 3 days of time that would typically take to go back and forth from our customer to our design team, back to the customer, and all that's done in real time on the spot for the customer to approve their design. And then there's other things like, we have 800 production employees on our factory floor that are selling patches and labels, emblems, from print to embroidery to 3D printing to injection molding. And all that data gets aggregated every day. And in that case, we're able to pull out all the waste using that information and optimize every piece of operations that we have. Other things like 3D printing, digital cutting, there's just so many opportunities for improvement that you can use either using data or the graphic renditions. And those are just the beginnings of what we're seeing in our space.
And what I love about your thought process on that, right, is most of the time when I work with organization on AI, it's more of looking at LLM level, making custom model. But I like how you try to use the ready-made available, which is GPT itself, and then exploring further, because the transformative power starts from what it is right now, and then we break it to other level. But on the same note, right, I do want to check with you, what would you discuss the transformative effect of AI, which had or will have on your industry, such as driving efficiency, quality, or enabling new business model?
I think it changes everything, but like anything else, we're a private organization, and we need to look for I would say a quick to a medium term ROI. So we don't just have unlimited funds to invest. So when we approached this, we got to get a model area or what we call quick wins. And again, like ChatGPT and those types of things will get you quick wins. Right. But then it's also making sure that the organization learns. So we have an initiative now to over the next 36 months to eliminate 100% of our interactive, meaning design back and forth between our customers and the business. So all of it's done in a forward-facing motion, meaning on our e-com platform. So the customers interact, like I said earlier, with the platform in real time. So again, you're cutting out 36 months. That's a huge initiative. But, again, we're approaching this from two different levels. One is these quick wins using GPTs and those other tools. And everyone in my business is using it. But the other one is this kind of big, grandiose project, which is to eliminate the back and forth of artwork and design using generative AI. So again, we went at it from a very small sort of quick wins. And then we took this big, huge project and said, all right, we're going to get this too. And, we think that over the next 36 months, we're not even close to where we need to be, but we're going to learn and we're going to make these iterative improvements quickly.
I think that's spot on. And I think, Randy, you have already answered this, but I do want to specifically ask you, so if you can give a more elaborative thought piece on that. Aside from the one you mentioned, what is some of the other benefit that you think we have not realized, but it will take time for us to get to the level in the industry?
I think the easiest one are things like chatbots, but that's just too easy. The big one we like, again, like I said, we have 800 plus employees just in our factory in Mexico, and there's so much data in between the lines. They come on and off all this production equipment. So, every single embroidery machine or every print machine or injection machine is connected to a central database or a central place where we aggregate all this information. And we have so much information, we don't have the time or the resources to do anything with it. So we think there's a lot of waste in that process. Mm-hmm. So by just getting all that data, aggregating it, and having to tell a story of where the waste is and what we can do to optimize our operations, we just think that's kind of the hidden gem in the middle.
I think that's a spot on. And Randy, since one segue, since you're driving the first team in this panel today, you mentioned about employees, right? How do you believe AI will, probably this question pops up everywhere right now, right?
I know what you're going to say, but.
So how do you think AI will impact the employees in the future?
So look, I think like every other sort of creative destruction philosophy, people are concerned about their jobs. Like we hear it every day. I think ultimately it's sort of cliche, but it's to grow without growing. The business is growing. Our job is to be transparent with our staff. We know it's there. They know it's there. Ultimately we need to educate them, and we're a learning business. We're a learning organization. So, in the case of, let's say, my design department, we have 150 designers. Ultimately, I'm talking about making that design department, putting it forward facing online. And all 150 of those people are saying, oh shit, I'm sorry. Oh no, I don't have a job. I think ultimately our responsibility is to make sure that we're positioning them for the next phase of the business, whatever that is. And at this point, we just don't know. We know that it's going to disrupt our industry. We know that we're better off being the disruptors rather than disrupted. And our role is to continually educate them to make sure that they move into the next space and wherever that is.
I think, I'm not going to put you on the spot, but you managed to, I think you kind of shed the light in a very balanced approach, right? We used to say that it's not, at least when I used to work with clients and in my line of work, in strategy, we think that it's not AI that is going to change everything. Is you need to know how to use AI, otherwise you'll get replaced, because AI will not replace you, but you will get replaced by someone who know how to use AI.
What is it? There's a saying that says, AI is not going to wipe out businesses. The people that use AI are the ones that are going to wipe out the competitors. So again, in our case, we're better off being the disruptors than the disrupted. And again, if we have 1,300 people total global, and if we double our business, I'd like not to have 2,600 people. I'd like to have 1,400 people. Right. And we'd like to think we could bump up comp by 30% or whatever the number is. Our turnover goes down, our customers are happy, our employees are like that. So it's a proverbial positive, but I think you need to embrace it. And we're aggressively embracing it on every possible front we can. And I think every day it also changes.
No, I think you're right on the spot. Thank you so much for that, Randy. And I think just to switch gears, right, I'm going to jump to Jason. Jason, since we covered with Randy about some of the impact he's seeing, and we landed with employee and then the implementation, I want to check in with you. Do you think it's too early or too late to consider AI investment? How do we prioritize these investments right now?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. The reality is it's going to feel like both. Okay. It's going to feel like you're too early, and it's going to feel like you're too late at the same time. And the reason for that is the technology is so nascent and it is advancing so quickly. It can feel too early. It can feel unsettling. It can feel like I need to wait until this kind of settles down a little bit. But because of the rapid pace of improvement, waiting around is going to make you far too late. And so you need to be comfortable with feeling too early and too late at the same time. And Randy talked about quick wins and learning iteratively. When you're too early, that's the best time to do that. You can take that low-hanging fruit and those quick wins to have iterative learning cycles so that you can mature with the technology as it advances.
I think that's you know what, one note I want to add, Jason, is we used to do something called horizon modeling. In technology, we try to plan horizon 1, horizon 2, horizon 3. AI is on every horizon.
Yeah.
Like today and tomorrow or 10 years, because that's how you want to prioritize investment, which is either too early or also too late.
Yes.
Right. And coming, because your expertise on industrial agent, I want to check in with you. What do you think is the driving the rise and focus of industrial agent or open-ended chatbot as a primary interface for AI? What are the criteria or characteristic that you think that needed to go when you want to make an impactful industrial agent?
So I think all of us are very familiar with, and most of our interactions with generative AI comes in that sort of chatbot framework, right? We're used to using ChatGPT or Perplexity or these other tools, and they're great and they're very powerful. And I think it's become that little quick button on my phone now to immediately jump to that, versus a Google search. But in an industrial setting, we need deterministic answers that are verifiable, because we're dealing with production, we're dealing with safety, we're dealing with things that the creative aspect of large language models are not as interesting to us as the reasoning engine is. And so you hear this talk about agents over and over again in an agentic approach. And really what that is that open chatbot type approach where it's ask me anything and I'll give you answer is really problematic when you need deterministic verifiable responses. And so what an agent allows you to do is to limit the scope of what you're working with down to a specific task. And Randy gave a great example with, being able to take in artwork and generate it. That's an agent, right? That's not an open chatbot do anything. That's the task of taking artwork and converting it into something that can now be reviewed for print. And by being able to limit the scope, it gives you 4 things. It allows you to give very precise instructions to your foundation model in terms of how you want it to perform. It allows you to predetermine the type of information you want to provide to that language model as context in giving the response. So instead of saying answer based on anything you're saying answer based on the information I'm providing you. And then it also gives us the opportunity to select a specific foundation model for that task. There are certain tasks that perform well with a small language model. There's some tasks that require a full language model like OpenAI or Claude or something else. And having that flexibility to use the most appropriate model for the task is the other flexibility that it gives us. And then finally, it allows you to give very specific instructions on how you want the output. Like in the example Randy provided, I need the output probably in a specific file format that is applicable to the work that they're performing. And so agents are very powerful that way in being able to take this open-ended scope of ask me anything, narrow it down to a specific task. And when you could do that, giving it instructions, specific information to answer with, choosing the language model or foundation model that's most appropriate and architecting the response, now you can start getting something that's deterministic, reliable, verifiable, and repeatable. And so that's why I think you're seeing such a big rise in this approach towards agents, because it takes something that's super powerful and can be anything to everybody, which is also not what you want in a lot of cases, and be something very specific to what you're doing.
It just you answered a lot of the question in my mind, but I also have twofold question, if you don't mind. But the first one is, since you already touched about foundation model, should we think about, you answered a part of it, but for our audience and of course for everyone else on the call, how do you think we should think about foundation when building industrial agent? Can we rely on publicly available model, or do you think there's a specific type of training, fine-tuning it, and make it bespoke as needed? Where would you draw the line?
I think our experience to date has been that the vast majority of tasks that you would like to perform with agents can be done with readily available models, right? So whether they're proprietary models, like OpenAI, or open source models like Meta or others, we found that, if you use sort of an 80-20 rule, it's more like 95.5. Like 95% of what you're doing could be done with the existing models today. There's this innate desire to have, well, nobody understands my business like me. I need a special model just for me. And what we've found so far is that's really not necessary yet. The fact that you have these context windows that have gotten pretty large in size allows you to provide proprietary information to the language model to say, answer the question based on what I'm giving you versus answer the question based on what you've been trained with. Now, there are outlier cases where you might need something that's proprietary or fine-tuned or trained, but the number of those use cases are actually very small. And doing that work is actually still very costly today. And I think what we'll find is as the cost of building bespoke models or fine-tuning or training those models comes down, that we might see more instances of that. But in the spirit of Randy's earlier talk about quick wins, that is not necessary today. There is so much that you can do today with the existing models that, trying to get wrapped around the axle around, developing a bespoke model might be a fun science project for some people within the company, but it's really not necessary from a business outcome standpoint today for most use cases.
And I think the readily available have gotten so much better over the past 1 year or so, and it's keep getting better and efficient and cheaper and much more. I think interoperability wise is much more easier to work with than how it was before, right? That there's no reason for us to crack our head a lot. Just I'm going to do the same spin I did with Randy. So I'm going to go back to the human-centric approach here. My question here is, what changes for the workforce in the age of industrialization? What would you say in terms of the people side?
So, similar to example to what Randy provided, but I'll give a different example, which is we were working with a large energy provider recently, right? A large oil and gas company. And in these large operations, if there's a major incident, you need to perform a root cause analysis to determine why that happened and be able to figure out what needs to be done within the business, either procedurally or with equipment or with maintenance, to make sure that that could never happen again. It's an incredibly important aspect for heavy asset industries and manufacturing. And the reality is that RCA process, that root cause analysis process for a lot of companies takes an incredibly long time. We're talking weeks to months sometimes. And so we were working with this company to say, how can we use AI to help with this? And so we helped work with them on an RCA agent that basically would take an incident and the information from that incident, and then from that, go find all of the relevant information related to that incident across all the different data types: structured data, unstructured data, CAD drawings, alarms, incidents, work orders, maintenance history. Bring all of that information together to provide context, to then ask the language model to go do an initial fault tree assessment based on the incident and the information that we collected. And we went from taking 3 to 4 weeks to get that initial fault tree assessment down to less than 30 minutes. And think about that from an efficiency standpoint for the worker. That's incredible. And a lot of times people think, wow, that's a great worker efficiency. I don't need as many people. But the reality is, in the businesses that we work with, we're not doing all the RCAs that we need to do to have an impact on production uptime because it takes too long. But if I can take something that takes 3 to 4 weeks down to 15 to 30 minutes for that initial assessment that subject matter expert can now use to go finalize that RCA, I can do more RCAs. I can remediate more issues that are going to prevent those things from happening in the future. And so I think a lot of times we think about the AI efficiency as a people efficiency. But the efficiency that it drives for our people actually allows them to do more that has a much bigger impact on our bottom line for production uptime and throughput than the size of my workforce. And that was the case here. Like I'm not interested in the size of my workforce as much as if I can do more of these RCA analysis and remediate more of these things, I'm going to have a much bigger impact on my production uptime and my throughput. And that moves the needle for me. Everything else is a rounding error.
I think you touched upon a big part of work. Probably, I think everyone on the call would have. I'm also willing to if people want to jump in, feel free. But then, Jason, you touched a very good point, because one of the things that I've realized in my work is when clients are thinking of, or when the leaders of the organization are thinking of let's get into AI. And that's when they realize, first of all, what is our value proposition? And then we always ask them to do basically end-to-end value chain analysis, how your operation runs. And then we see where you want to improve. And what most so often that we see, Jason, is exactly you articulated. You realize there's so much thing we could fix that we should have fixed before even getting into AI, because if AI is just a model that applies on top of your existing data structure. And if your data structure is not up to standard, which most cases it's not because of R&D budget, right? So, if it comes to CapEx versus OpEx. So AI is actually driving this whole data infrastructure transformation project, because 9 out of 10 times when someone says AI project, it's a data project.
It is. And the reason it is, to the example I gave before, I want to be able to provide context, information meaningful to my question, and provide that to the foundation model and say, answer my question based on this information. In Randy's example, you're saying, create the drawing based on this artwork, not based on a description of the artwork, but on this actual artwork. And so don't get creative, use this. And in an industrial setting, we're doing the same thing. We're saying, perform a root cause analysis based on this information, not based on just what you think. And that requires that you have super low latency access to that data in the first place, and that those data relationships are known to you. And so if you talk about the investments that we need to start making now, it's investments in making sure that our data infrastructure gives us that type of relational access to all of the data at super low latency, because you want to be able to ask a question of a large language model and in a sub-second level latency, provide it the information that it needs to give you a response. And so sometimes a lot of the investments that we need to make are not so much in the actual language models you're using or the agents themselves. It's in preparing your data framework to be able to work in an agentic way.
I think well said, Jason. The last question I have is, when AI started, there was a lot of hype versus reality curve. And I think that curve has come down to a very, manageable level right now with a lot of trial and very expensive trial.
I don't know about that. There's still a lot of hype.
But
that's okay.
one thing I want to ask in that, right? How do you think we should stay grounded when it comes to our strategy, planning, and investment to avoid shooting beyond the mark when it comes to AI?
It's the quick wins aspect that Randy talked about. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit out there. And a lot of times when something new comes along, you think, how can I use this technology to do something I've never done before? When in reality, it's how can I use this technology to do what I'm doing right now in a much more efficient way? That's sort of the quick win, low-hanging fruit that you can do now. Yes, there are going to be opportunities to do things you've never done before. And I've seen examples of that. They're pretty impressive. But don't make that your starting point. Make your starting point looking at what you do today and making it more efficient so that you can do more, right? And Randy touched on that, grow without growing. AI really provides us the opportunity to grow without growing in a way that we probably haven't seen in a couple decades.
Fair. I know we went from Randy shared his thought piece, and also Jason highlighted his thoughts. I want to quickly look at our Q&A, so if there's anything we want to pick up, but I want to take one question right now, open to the floor, all the panelists. Adam Robinson asked, when going for quick wins, tool like ChatGPT, how concerned are you about the data privacy? Are you using any specific strategy to protect sensitive information? Thoughts from the group?
I can answer that one really quick. Almost all of the providers, the cloud providers today that are hosting these large language models, provide enterprise solutions that keep your information proprietary. So when you provide proprietary context in answering the question, they do not store that information. They do not use that information to train the model. So that problem has really been solved today. And you don't really have to worry about that. When you work with, Azure and AWS and Google and a lot of these other providers, they already host these models in a way that secures your data sufficiently. And so it's a problem that's already been solved, which is great.
Yeah, let me just double down on that, because I think it highlights something that is different about these foundation models than what people used to call machine learning. It used to be like, I was training a model. I'm putting my data and it's becoming part of the model. So then in that framework, the question of, oh, maybe it's staying, maybe someone else is using that model. That's not how these tools work. That's the power of the pre-trained foundation model, is it's a general purpose reasoner with, as Jason said, pretty good at 95% of the problems if you give it the right inputs. Remember, it's blind. It has no idea anything except what you tell it. And so that's one of the strengths of it, is you're not training it from scratch. You're using what's already been trained off the corpus of human knowledge. And then what you're giving it is just, here's what I need you to reason about now. Here's what I see in my factory. Tell me what you think I should do. Or here is the data on this RCA, or here is the design. And that just goes in with the question and is done once the answer is given and does not become part of the model. So it's actually much, much safer from a data privacy perspective than the older approach of training your own neural networks on a training model. You're not training this model, you're giving it information to answer a question, and then it forgets. The model itself is static.
Randy, any thought from your side from what you have seen on that question, or should we jump it off?
No, I'll give you my perspective. When the question came in and I was reading it, I put in my team's chat to my CTO, what are we doing about data privacy? so as the question came in, I was like, uh-oh. So I don't have an answer that's any wiser than anything anyone has said.
I think I do. I think Tim, kind of gave a very Jason gave a very quick snapshot. I think Tim covered, from a technical perspective. And if I can also add a bit on the note, it is an evolving tool, right? It's an evolving system that has gotten really better. And I think there's a lot of publicly, because I'm coming from a think tank perspective on this, there's a lot of methodology that is being done for organization to see how you can enforce data privacy when it comes to using language model. There's a lot of them getting better and better. And I think most of the leading organizations are coming together to put up a better framework, better thing every day by day. And I think it's just a matter of time before it becomes part of the norm, where it just as simple as how it looks like a cookie capture or something, but it becomes really rudimentary and we'll get to the level of the highest confidence, which we already have. I think it's more of, to Tim's point, is communicating what is happening so that the confidence level stays the same, if not. All right, Tim, I'm back to you. We're going to look at more questions later, and we're going to take I do want to take this time to remind our audience, please drop all your questions in the Q&A chat. Our panelists will be more than happy to touch upon it. We are at our halfway mark right now. We'd love to get more questions from the group. And now, Tim, I wanted to, not saying saving the last one for the least, I mean, the best one for the least, but I want to check in with you. How do you see AI transforming the speed and effectiveness of digitization in manufacturing operation? Because especially for organizations who are currently mid-transition to digital system.
Yeah, so it's really important. And I think about it in two ways. So I think as Jason mentioned, also as Randy mentioned, take Randy first. So Randy was saying, hey, we have all of this data that we collect from our operations and it's sitting in a database somewhere. And we think somewhere in there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of hidden gems, I think as you called them, where you could reduce scrap, maybe improve efficiency. I think this is where a lot of companies are in digitization, where they've collected some data. But before AI, it was somewhat hazy how that turned into business value sometimes. It's sitting in a database. It's not actually making a better decision. It's not actually solving a problem. So one of the things we see with the new AI tools is they make a much more powerful outcome. So they make the ROI sort of on like what's the benefit side. I can actually solve a problem. I can actually cut 3 days off of my design time. I could actually do every RCA I want to do versus only the top 5%. I could actually track every single downtime, not only the ones that are 2 hours long, maybe also the ones that are 5 minutes long, which I didn't even know about before because it took so much time to figure out what they were. And my process for solving them took me 20 minutes. I just ignored it. I took it as a cost of business that I couldn't solve. So that's one piece. It helps with a much more powerful and impactful outcome on top of digitization. And then the other one is it helps you digitize itself. Because if you think about it, if you have all of these different manufacturing systems, oftentimes there are legacy systems, there's a mix, so many different IT systems that play in a complex manufacturing environment. Just getting all the data together is a challenge. It's one of the reasons why companies are so unevenly digitized, because it's not easy. It takes a lot of investment. And so there's also opportunities for some of those tasks, like get data from this machine, figure out what it means, and then put it into my coherent data model, as Jason was mentioning. What is that picture of your operations that is going to make sense to a person and therefore also to an AI model to ask a question based on? So we see those two aspects. So one is it can directly help accelerate some of your activities, digitizing your operations. But two, it provides a much more powerful business incentive for doing that, because your outcome at the end of the day is not data in a database. It's an agent who can solve problem X and problem Y and problem Z, and you can see how it could solve problem W in the future. So it becomes very clear how this is directly adding business value, something worthy of increased investment versus being seen maybe only as a cost center or as an afterthought or as a science project, as in some organizations have been seen in the past.
And I think it's a follow-up question, right? You did answer this already, but there's a twofold. In what ways do you believe AI actually enhance the precision impact of digitization? And I think that's why you mentioned about the whole, it gets better on its own, on itself, right? The second part question I had is, are there any particular data insight, outcome that can only be achieved with AI?
Yeah, so let me answer that in a couple of ways with some specific examples. And first, let me take, a very, very old example. OEE, overall equipment efficiency. It's often, maybe the first step on someone's digitization journey, which is I've got some equipment, I got a factory line. I want to know, is it running? How fast is it running? Is it running as fast as it should be? And is it producing good parts? So sort of the core foundation of like, how do I improve my factory? So it used to be that the way you would do a lot of work, get a lot of data, a lot of manual reporting, and you'd be able to compute a number, my OEE score. But you would have no idea how to improve it, right? You would just say, okay, my score is 50%. I want to make it 51 tomorrow. And so the outcome of digitization was being able to have just one KPI number that you could then ask a team to figure out, what are you going to do next week to make this number higher? What are you going to do the following week? And it was critical because you needed that sort of, where am I? How am I doing? Am I getting better over time? Am I continuously improving? Take that exact same example now and use AI. Now I collect all this information. I still get the same score, but now I know exactly the root causes behind. I have an agent looking at every single root cause that's impacting that score and providing me recommendations on how to improve it. So I've taken something which was, the outcome was just a number, to now the outcome is that number, but also a very specific set of agentic specific tools to improve that number. And that's like a radically different outcome than just, I have a dashboard showing a number, which people can say, well, that's good, I needed that, but it's sort of a cost of doing business. I don't see the value other than now I need someone to figure out how to make that number better. The AI helps you sort of complete that and also provide, and here's how you can make it better. Here's a guided action. Here's your top downtime reasons. And by the way, I trolled through all of this data and here's a suggestion. Looks like this setting is wrong in your machine. It looks like maybe this process isn't tuned correctly. It looks like this run was very different from an identical run that should have been identical a week ago. So what we see is the problems in manufacturing haven't changed. What's changed is a new way to solve them that's much more complete and much more specific. And that's why I think people get really excited about the AI agents, is they can see, the problems have always been efficiency, scrap, cutting time to production, cutting time to new product introduction, as Randy was saying, doing RCAs, making my operations more efficient. And in the context of those old problems, you have now a much new and much more powerful tool that can more completely solve them in a repeatable way. Whereas in the past, it was sort of a black box of have someone come in and figure out what to do. Now you can actually provide much more guidance on what you should do to solve the problem. I think that's the change that is making these outcomes, much more impactful for manufacturers.
I think if I correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, we could also say, for the lack of a better word, we're able to find and we promote efficiency in a sandbox approach to AI, right? Because you put a box, you try to caveat and trying to improve it, right? But just imagine if companies currently thinking about this, they're in various stages of digitization, from adopting AI to scoping. How would you say they should prioritize the immediate ROI versus the long-term model in a very specific case?
Yeah. So I think what I would say is, let me constrain it a little bit, talk about, we're manufacturing, I'm talking about factories. How am I doing my factory operations? On the long run horizon, you could think of like, what do I imagine in the future I could be doing? And I would say, like, long run, it's, what if I had a complete picture of all of my operations, all of the details, that perfect data model Jason was mentioning? What if I actually had it? Which, of course, very few people have that today, maybe very, very few. People are on a journey to get there. It's a constant journey. And you can say, okay, that's where I want to go. But then immediately, let me break off a part of that. And not maybe just like one piece of data, but say a subset of my operations. For Randy, it was, okay, my design process. Maybe it's this particular set of machines. Maybe it's this process that's really bad for me, really important. or it's injection molding, or it's this particular process, or it's, you know, this building in my factory that's really critical. Let me identify a subset of the whole problem and try to solve that one. And I know it's going to get me in my overall like direction. It's going to get me to my complete picture of all of my operations that I've digitized perfectly with a good data model, and I can ask the big questions. But before I do that, let me identify a smaller question. And let me ask, what's the most important smaller question I can solve right now, get value from that, and then move ahead. And let me give you an example. So we worked with a number of factories. Take one in particular that was focused just on a really basic problem, downtime. Their factory lines, they had too many hours of downtime every day. It's a perennial problem in manufacturing. And they took a new approach. They used more data collection from their machines. They used AI tools to then help facilitate that, make it easier so they could achieve it without too much impact on people's time, and to analyze the data. And they were able to save a couple hours a day of downtime, a huge impact on their factory line, actually translated to more than $1 million of savings per year just in that one plant. And it wasn't a new problem. They just focused on what was most important to their business. It was aligned with their company's long-term goal of let me do this across the entire business. But this was the biggest pain point right now. They could break it off, get just the data needed for that problem, and then solve it, get the ROI. Now they're going to do it again for quality. Now they're going to do it again for, you know, how they set up their machine programs. And so breaking off these business-focused slices of your overall journey, solving them incrementally, and making sure that each one is sort of paying for the next investment to solve the next problem. That's how we see companies being very successful here.
I think that's a very, strategy-driven answer, Tim, because I think investment plays a huge role when it comes to tech. And I think approaching in a very systematic approach, as you illustrated, I think that's a good call. I do want to open this question for Tim and Jason together because the way it's structured. What role do you think AI-based industrial agent would play improving operational decision on the shop floor versus the executive level?
Yeah, I mean, I can start. I mean, it has impacts on both, but I see the shop floor impacts as much more clear because shop floor is all about real time. It's about right now. It's about tactical. And this is one of the areas where so often we're in fog of war situations right now, where you don't have the data right place. You got to make a decision right now. And you also have very few people, right? Like it's not the case you have so many experts that know monitoring these lines. We actually have fewer experts than we need. As Jason mentioned, we don't even do all the RCAs that we need to do. So all of these death by 1,000 cut style operational things that happen on the shop floor, you now have a repeatable and scalable tool, this AI agent, where you can say, I want to do every single RCA and I don't have people to do it, but I'm gonna have an AI agent do it. And I'm gonna see then what I want to task my people to do based on what this sort of pre-triage does. So we see huge opportunities at scale on the shop floor because there's so many little problems that were just too small to individually solve before, but you add them up and they become massive. But with an AI agent, you can actually solve each individual problem with now this automation approach and then reap that massive savings.
Jason, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'm in the exact same boat. It's the quick wins, the low-hanging fruit is at the shop floor level. It's at the operational level. Of course, there's things that you can do in reporting and executive analysis and things of that nature. But if you really want to move the needle in a meaningful way that drives throughput, production uptime, and those sorts of things, the vast majority of benefit comes at the level of the frontline workers.
Thank you so much, Jason and Tim. I'm looking at time, and I didn't know that we already done with 3/4 of the mark of the call already. That was a bit quicker than anticipated. So I want to reserve some time. We got a couple of questions from the group as well. Before I jump into that, Randy, I wanted to get to this at the end to you because I think now that we have an insight, of course, from yourself on what's happening in reality. Jason talked about the investment side of it, and of course, Tim alluded on a specific use case and how you systematically approach this overall investment. So with all that said, Randy, I wanna get to you on this. You are a big proponent of investing money in transformative technology today that will reap benefits tomorrow and 5 to 10 years down the road. What are your thoughts on it?
You know, I said it earlier, but I'll just repeat the point. Like, I think we have two things. We're a learning organization, so that's part of our culture. So, you know, just reading some of the questions and looking at the feed, I think if you allow the business to learn, the people will grow, and when people want to grow, I think there was a question in the chat that said something to the effect of, if we let people sort of go off and do their own stuff, isn't it a waste of resources and time? And I don't think so. I think that if the top down from the business, you're pushing people to learn and you're embracing the learning, you'll reap the benefits as a byproduct of what you're allowing them to do. And I think that has to be part of the culture. It has to be ingrained in the culture of the business, and it has to be acceptable. So, I think so. To really answer your question, when we make our investments in this type of thing, we are looking for an ROI, but I think at the end of the day, the ROI is really just a byproduct of having a better customer experience, and making sure that our staff is also benefiting from these tools. So, So
I think that's well put, Randy, especially when you mention about the byproduct of the investment rather than thinking of it, this is what we want to do, because it's a synergy of human-centric technology evolution and then being a thought leader.
I think it just depends on the business, right? I mean, like, in our case, we're a privately funded business, so we have to be conscious of making sure that the investments do have a benefit, and it's not just the investment for the sake of making the investment or the sexiness of the technology. I mean, I'm going to rewind really quick to a mistake that I made in the past. So NFTs came out; they were really hot. We're in the middle of COVID, and I talked to my CMO, like, we're going to get into NFTs because it's the hot thing. So now she's like skittish with me, and she's always coming back to me and saying, "Hey, like, is AI the next NFT thing?" And I think ultimately the question is, we made a mistake there, but the mistake wasn't there. The mistake was the business learned. NFTs are based on the blockchain, and that's still part of the fundamental sort of infrastructure of everything that's going to happen in the future, irrespective of the point of whether it's the NFT or not. It's just the general idea that we learn, we make mistakes, it's iterative. If we go down this generative AI path and 3 of the tools we use don't work, but 2 of them do, that's exactly right. The overall benefit of the business is a win, and you learned. So it goes back to the same question, at least from my standpoint, philosophically, it's what did you learn? Did we do better? And if you're making, and again, that's a cultural value thing more than it is a technical thing.
Now, I think I really second your answer, Randy. For one of the main reason is 2 steps forward, 1 step backward is still 1 step forward, right? And I think the tool is just an enabler. And I think we always say that focus on the experience. The technology is just an enabler for the experience. And I think having that culture being built as an organization, I think that's the basic major win, right? So we have 12 minutes on the clock. So what I'm going to do rapid fire on the questions we have. The first one we have from Shrita Charles, apologies if I'm mispronouncing your name. How can we leverage industrial IoT and blockchain together to deliver quick wins in the supply chain transparency and efficiency while demonstrating tangible ROI in sustainability-driven industry like herbal medicine and tea? I think the question is about how can we leverage industrial IoT or blockchain in the supply chain mechanism for a sustainable industry?
So I guess what I would say is, let me take parts of the question, right? So one is are there opportunities to better share data across the supply chain? No question. Tons of opportunities to better share data. Data often stays in the factory, but these factories are part of a complex web or chain building a product. Is there a way that we can do something new to enable data to leave the factory? So let me say a couple things. So first thing is, do we do a better job actually getting it into the factory and storing it in a way that it can be shared? That's digitization. But then 2, how do we more safely share it or provide a vehicle by which someone can access it outside the factory? And I think that's a question that still is challenging. Like, how do you do that efficiently from a business perspective? It's not a technical question, it's a business question. And some people do pick blockchain as that technology. I'm not an expert on that. But I think the problem space is something that is particularly useful to solve.
Thank you, Tim. Any thoughts from Jason or Randy?
Oh, no thoughts from me.
And I think if I want to, because there's another question from Harpreet as well, which is how IoT works in a factory and industrial setting. If I want to tweak on that question, following up on this, right, to all the 3 panelists here, we always do what you call in the world of strategies. What is the next Horizon 3 investment, Horizon 2 investment? So it becomes your day-to-day in Horizon 1. And one of the word that is resurfacing, which is very apparent to IoT, is digital twin.
Mm-hmm.
The concept of digital twin is not new to any one of us, but I think there was the investment, the opportunity cost of data infrastructure versus the return it gave was so unique that only certain use cases made more sense. But now with combining AI on top of the IoT sensors, on top of the digital twin database, there's much more active usage in a grand scheme of things. So I want to check with all three of you, if you encounter, what are your thoughts on digital twin plus AI?
So, this kind of goes back to something that Tim talked about a little earlier, which is, having access to the data is incredibly important if you want to leverage AI. And that AI benefit is now increasing the value of these digital twins and kind of focusing the effort on that. So if you use the example I gave you, at least in a heavy asset industrial space where I spend most of my time, the data is super diverse, right? It's structured data like asset hierarchies and work orders combined with a lot of unstructured data like P&IDs, which are piping and instrumentation diagrams, CAD drawings for the facility that are normally PDF files, and then just gobs and gobs of sensor data that we call time series data, which is technically structured. It's simple. It's just a timestamp and a value, but it's trillions of rows of this stuff. And what's interesting in an industrial setting is A, you got that diversity, but B, none of the data ever matches, right? So the asset reference and the asset hierarchy doesn't match the asset reference in the work order, doesn't match the asset reference in the IoT tags. And so how do you build a knowledge graph of that data where you find the meaningful relationships, persist those into the knowledge graph so that when I have a question, I can very quickly navigate that knowledge graph to find the relevant information, including that spans the diversity of that data, to be able to present that to a large language model for what's going on. That's digital twin. Digital twin is being able to connect all of that data together in a way that represents the real world so that I can access it at super low latency to perform analysis or provide as context to AI, et cetera. And so there were, as you mentioned, very specific use cases where having that digital twin made sense. But right. AI makes it so that all use cases benefit from having that digital twin in place. That low latency access across that diverse data set that represents the real world is what gives you the ability to gather the information and provide it as context to the large language model to say, answer my question based on this data, not based on data you think you know. And that is what gives us deterministic responses that are verifiable using our proprietary information. So I think the advent of generative AI, large language models, and the use cases that now opens up has broadened the necessity and applicability of having a digital twin.
Yeah, let me just double down here. I see these two things as now inextricably linked. And the analogy I would give is, let's say I'm a person. So I'm an agent. I'm a human agent. If I walk into a factory to solve a problem, I use my eyes to see, I use my ears to hear, I experience the factory and I use that to understand. There are no eyes in a foundation model, there's no ears. The version of the factory that it knows is only within the digital twin. The digital twin is the factory that it sees. If your digital twin is empty, your AI is blind and has no idea what's going on. How could it possibly help you make a decision if it literally doesn't know anything going on in your factory? Now, contrast that. If your digital twin were perfect, it would know as much as I would see in the factory. It would know everything. I see everything. I hear everything going on in the machines. Like, it could make so many important decisions. So really, when we think about digital twin, the reason why it's become so important now is it is the eyes, the ears, the sensory input for your AI models. And even the best AI model, absent sensory input, is blind to your actual problem, is blind to your factory. And that's why it's so important now. Previously, it was a nice to have. Now it's core to getting value from AI.
That's fair. And I want to do a quick speed run because I realized there's a couple of questions in the news session, but I'm just going to quickly address Louis' request. Talked about how are we going to put guardrails when it comes to people jumping in different stuff. And I think Randy have already touched upon it. But in the interest of time, I do want to quickly share one point, then jumping to the other questions from the panelists. I think it's down to organization leadership, creating the avenues so people have opportunity to do what they do best, but also opportunity to come on and then try this new technology, figure things out, and make things happen. I think we're already seeing that across different organization culture. And the question that I want to propose to the team, rapid fire, is Daniel is asking, what are your views in UNS, Unified Namespace, as a data architecture concept? Any takers?
I mean, in the rapid fire sense, I'll go first. It's great, but it's part of the solution. It talks about physical hierarchy. Send data based on where things happen in your factory. Yeah, of course. But also, what are you sending and when are you sending it are also really important, but somehow not talked as much about in the unified namespace, except sending where. So it's one piece of the overall context, but not everything. But for sure, it's important to do that, and it's a good general purpose choice.
Agree. It provides some, I would say, first level contextualization of the data, but doesn't result in the digital twin that we talked about earlier. So it's a piece to the puzzle, but it's not the end all be all of what you need to do to have the digital twin necessary to be the eyes and ears that you talked about. It needs more than that.
Perfect.
From my standpoint, I don't even understand the question. I don't even understand the question. So yeah.
I think I would second Randy on this, because I didn't know what it was until you two gentlemen came and explained to us what is it. Moving on to Joey. Joey say work in new product development for consumer good and therefore overlap with many artists and professional designers. AI has the ability to democratize creative process. How do you strike a balance to ensure your true creative resources are not marginalized? I think this is a common theme is arising. Any thoughts from the group in a rapid fire session?
I mean, I'll take that very quickly. I don't think you do. I think that you push the technology as hard as you can, and you iteratively allow your staff to be more aggressive with the technology. And again, the idea is to get to produce results as fast as you possibly can, so that your customer experience is better. So I don't think there is a balance. I think the technology is a tool to get a specific result, and you use those tools in the best possible way to get the kind of results that the business is trying to get.
Perfect. I see a couple of questions. Thanks so much for picking that up, Randy. A couple of questions on quality and data. I think we kind of covered that in a different capacity. And I also look at one that's talking about privacy, and I think we addressed that. There's one new one, which is Tom basically saying KPI of your operation should be the first priority and worthy of investment collecting data. So sometimes people don't know what they don't know. So I asked the panel, if perhaps the initial goals should be production data, virtualization, data history tracking, basic performance optimization. So if you want to go after the basic item that we all want, enhancing, et cetera, would this be not a great way to start the journey?
This is from Tom,
It's a great way to start the journey.
Yeah, it's a great,
Yeah, it's a great way. And anytime you're taking a more formal approach to determining what agents you need or what use cases you want to target, you're absolutely going to start from this KPI-driven approach of what could move the needle the most with the least amount of effort. And so absolutely, that's a great way to do it. There's also sort of a bottom-up approach that was talked about in an earlier question, was allowing people to use the technology in their daily work to find new things and new ways of working. And you want to enable both of those. You want to enable people to be creative with the technology, but you also want to have some formalized investments that you make where you're putting wood behind the arrow, and you're going to use those KPIs to prioritize where can we have the greatest impact. So absolutely, yes, that KPI-driven approach would be the framework from which that you prioritize your investments, but you still want to enable sort of a broader access to this technology to your work base so that they can find creative, innovative new ways of working on their own as well.
Amazing. And I know we are right on time, so I want to take this moment to thank all our panelists for the insight and the thought leadership, especially Jason, Randy, and of course, Jason, Randy, and also Tim as well. I want to also take the moment to thank all our audience that joined us, and also for the questions. Apologies if we could not get everything out, but of course, feel free to reach out to the panelists on LinkedIn because they're available. They'll be happy to share any questions or any insight you'd like to have. And I want to thank our sponsor, Arch System, to make sure that this was possible to have this conversation. And once again, thank you, everyone. I'll pass the floor to the panelists to say their thank you. But next session is Shaping the Future of Manufacturing, Human-Centered Digital Transformation, sponsored by Tulip. Thank you.